Subscribe now. Click the bell for political devastation. The political earthquake struck Austin like a thunderbolt on the 8th of December, 2025, when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stepped up to the microphone in Dallas and dropped the most devastating announcement in Texas politics. What started as speculation about her potential Senate run exploded into a declaration of war against corruption. That would leave Ken Paxton reeling and Republican strategists scrambling for damage control. The moment Crockett announced her candidacy for the United States Senate, every political expert in Texas reached the same conclusion. Ken Paxton's Senate dreams were already dead and buried before the campaign had even officially begun. This wasn't just another political announcement. It was the sound of justice finally coming for the most corrupt attorney general in American history. Hey everyone, before we dive into the most explosive political development in Texas history, you absolutely need to hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to witness is exactly why corrupt politicians fear authentic leaders. We bring you the moments when justice finally catches up to corruption, and the results are absolutely devastating. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Ken Paxton even has a chance against Jasmine Crockett? The setup for this incredible political destruction had been building for months as rumors swirled about whether the viral political superstar would make the leap from the House to challenge for higher office. But what nobody anticipated was how perfectly Crockett's announcement would align with the mounting scandals that had been systematically destroying Ken Paxton's political future, while demonstrating exactly why his Senate ambitions were doomed from the start. Ken Paxton, the scandal-plagued attorney general who had somehow survived impeachment proceedings and multiple federal investigations, had been positioning himself for a Senate run based on his Trump endorsement and conservative credentials. What he hadn't counted on was facing an opponent who combined viral political star power with the legal expertise to systematically expose every aspect of his corruption while building a grassroots movement that would make his campaign impossible to sustain. Jasmine Crockett brought a dramatically different profile to this Senate race that immediately shifted the entire political landscape in ways that made Paxton's candidacy look increasingly desperate and unsustainable. As a former civil rights attorney and sitting congresswoman with a proven track record of viral political communication, she represented everything Paxton was not: clean, competent, authentic, and committed to actual justice rather than political theater. People, we are about to witness what happens when systematic corruption meets authentic political leadership. If you are not subscribed yet, you are missing the political moment that show exactly why character matters in American elections. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which scandal do you think will hurt Paxton the most. The timing of Crockett's announcement couldn't have been more perfect for exposing Paxton's fundamental weakness as a Senate candidate. Just weeks before her December announcement, new details had emerged about the FBI investigation into his real estate dealings with convicted felon Nate Paul, creating a cloud of federal criminal liability that made his Senate candidacy a massive liability. For Texas Republicans, who were already struggling with suburban voter defections, the Nate Paul connection represented exactly the kind of systematic corruption that Crockett's legal background made her uniquely qualified to prosecute in the court of public opinion. As investigators continued uncovering evidence of potential bribery and abuse of office, Paxton's ability to defend his record became increasingly impossible, while Crockett's clean background created a stark contrast that would define the entire campaign narrative. But the FBI investigation was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to Paxton's political vulnerabilities. The whistleblower scandal that had led to mass resignations from his office provided additional evidence of systematic dysfunction and retaliation that contradicted everything voters expected from their state's top law enforcement official. When multiple senior prosecutors resigned and filed complaints about Paxton's conduct, it created a pattern of misconduct that no amount of Trump endorsements could overcome. The resignation letters from career prosecutors who had served under both Republican and Democratic attorneys general painted a picture of an office in chaos, where political considerations routinely overruled legal ethics and staff members faced retaliation for raising concerns about potential criminal behavior. This wasn't partisan politics, but career law enforcement professionals concluding that their boss had crossed lines that made their continued service impossible. Share this incredible political analysis right now because you're about to see how systematic corruption creates its own political destruction. Hit that share button and tell your friends they need to see this complete breakdown of why character matters in political campaigns. What is your take on prosecutors resigning over ethical concerns? For Jasmine Crockett, the prosecutor resignations provided perfect ammunition for highlighting the contrast between her legal background and Paxton's scandal-ridden tenure. While Paxton was driving experienced prosecutors out of his office due to ethical concerns, Crockett had built her career as a civil rights attorney fighting for justice and defending constitutional principles. The comparison couldn't have been more stark or politically devastating. The impeachment proceedings that Paxton had survived in the Texas legislature provided additional evidence of how even his own Republican colleagues had concluded that his conduct warranted removal from office. Although he ultimately avoided conviction due to political calculations rather than factual determinations, the impeachment process had documented a pattern of abuse that would be impossible to defend in a statewide Senate campaign. The evidence presented during impeachment included testimony about his relationship with Nate Paul, misuse of office resources, potential criminal behavior that painted a picture of systematic corruption, extending far beyond isolated mistakes or poor judgment. For voters who paid attention to the proceedings, Paxton's survival said more about Republican political calculations than his actual innocence of the charges. Republican legislators who had voted to impeach Paxton provided Crockett with built-in validator for her criticism of his fitness for higher office when members of his own party had concluded that his conduct warranted removal from his current position, arguing that he should be promoted to the United States Senate became politically absurd and strategically impossible. The suburban voter erosion that had already damaged Paxton in his 2022 re-election provided additional evidence of his fundamental weakness as a statewide candidate in an increasingly competitive Texas political environment. Despite running in a strong Republican year with Trump's endorsement, Paxton had underperformed other statewide Republicans, suggesting significant vulnerability among the educated suburban voters who were becoming increasingly important in Texas elections. This is absolutely incredible documented political weakness. Hit that like button if you are shocked by how much scandal one politician can survive. Subscribe right now because we analyze exactly how corruption eventually catches up to politicians who think they're above the law. What do you think about Republicans who impeach their own party members? Crockett's announcement immediately shifted media coverage from speculation about her intentions to analysis of how her candidacy would expose Paxton's weaknesses while highlighting her own strengths as a candidate. Political reporters who had covered both politicians noted the dramatic contrast in their public profiles, legal backgrounds, and relationships with law enforcement professionals. The fundraising implications of Crockett's viral political brand became immediately apparent as small dollar donations began pouring in from across the country within hours of her announcement. Unlike Paxton, who faced ongoing legal expenses and potential federal charges that complicated his fundraising efforts, Crockett could focus entirely on building a campaign organization and messaging operation designed to maximize her viral communication advantages. Her proven ability to generate massive social media engagement provided a built-in advantage for reaching younger voters and suburban women who had been moving away from Republican candidates due to concerns about extremism and corruption. While Paxton's base consisted primarily of rural conservative voters who were already committed Republicans, Crockett's appeal extended across demographic lines in ways that could expand the electorate and change the fundamental dynamics of Texas politics. The legal community response to Crockett's announcement provided additional validation for her candidacy, highlighting the professional concerns about Paxton's conduct that extended far beyond partisan politics. Bar associations, civil rights organizations, and legal ethics experts who rarely commented on political campaigns began expressing support for her candidacy based on her record of professional excellence and commitment to constitutional principles. For legal professionals who had watched Paxton's scandals unfold over multiple years, Crockett's candidacy represented an opportunity to support someone who embodied the highest traditions of the legal profession rather than someone whose conduct had brought shame to the office of Attorney General. The contrast between her civil rights work and his corruption investigations resonated particularly strongly among lawyers who understood the importance of ethical leadership in law enforcement. People, we are about to witness the most incredible David versus Goliath political story of 2026. Subscribe right now because we bring you the analysis that shows exactly how authentic political leadership defeats systematic corruption. Hit that like button and share this with everyone who needs to understand why this Senate race will change Texas politics forever. The Republican establishment response to Paxton's likely Senate candidacy revealed deep concerns about his ability to win a general election while avoiding significant down-ballot damage to other Republican candidates. Party leaders who had reluctantly supported him for Attorney General due to Trump's endorsement privately expressed fears that his scandals would become a liability for the entire Republican ticket in an increasingly competitive state. Polling data that emerged after Crockett's announcement showed the fundamental challenge Paxton would face in defending his record against someone with her communication skills and clean background. While he maintained strong support among Trump's base, his approval ratings among suburban voters and college-educated Republicans showed significant weakness that could prove fatal in a statewide race. The contrast in their backgrounds became even more stark when examined through the lens of qualifications for representing Texas in the United States Senate. Crockett's experience as a civil rights attorney, state legislator, and federal representative provided a foundation of public service and legal expertise that stood in sharp contrast to Paxton's record of scandal and controversy. Her work defending constitutional rights, fighting for justice, aligned perfectly with what voters expected from their senators, while his history of using his office for personal benefit and political retaliation represented everything they wanted to change about American politics. The moral clarity of this contrast made the campaign narrative almost impossible for Paxton to overcome through traditional political messaging. The national implications of the Texas Senate race added additional pressure on Paxton's candidacy, while providing Crockett with access to fundraising and volunteer resources from across the country. Democratic strategists who understood that controlling the Senate might depend on flipping Texas began viewing her candidacy as one of the most important races in the 2026 cycle. For Republicans concerned about maintaining their Senate majority, Paxton's potential candidacy represented a nightmare scenario where their nominees' personal scandals could cost them a crucial seat, while energizing Democratic turnout throughout the state. The possibility that Trump's endorsement could force them to defend someone under federal investigation created strategic problems that had no easy solutions. Oh my God, these political implications just keep getting bigger. Hit the like button if you are amazed by how one Senate race could change national politics. Subscribe because we analyze exactly how state races affect federal power. Comment below. Do you think Texas is really turning blue? The demographic trends that had been gradually shifting Texas politics in a more competitive direction aligned perfectly with Crockett's candidacy while creating additional challenges for Paxton's appeal beyond his core conservative base. The growing population of college-educated professionals in major metropolitan areas represented exactly the kind of voters who would be most attracted to her background and most repelled by his scandals. Young voter registration and participation rates that had been increasing in recent Texas elections suggested an electorate that would be particularly responsive to Crockett's viral social media presence and authenticity while being skeptical of traditional Republican politics with corruption problems. Her ability to speak directly to these voters through digital platforms gave her a built-in advantage that Paxton's more conventional campaign style couldn't match. The gender dynamics of the race provided additional advantages for Crockett's candidacy while highlighting another area of weakness for Paxton among the suburban women voters who had been moving away from Republican candidates. Her background defending women's rights and fighting for equality contrasted sharply with his record of supporting policies that restricted reproductive freedom and limited gender equality protection. Hispanic voter trends in Texas provided another area where Crockett's candidacy could capitalize on Republican weaknesses, while building on Democratic gains in communities that had traditionally been competitive. Her civil rights background and commitment to immigration reform aligned with the priorities of these growing constituencies. While Paxton's harsh immigration enforcement record created natural opposition, the coalition-building potential that Crockett's candidacy represented became immediately apparent as endorsements began flowing in from labor unions, civil rights organizations, environmental groups, and progressive advocacy organizations that had been energized by her congressional work and viral political communication. This level of organized support provided a foundation for grassroots organizing that Paxton's scandal plagued candidacy would struggle to mesh. The media coverage dynamic that favored Crockett's candidacy reflected both her superior communication skills and the inherent newsworthiness of her political rise compared to Paxton's ongoing legal troubles. While coverage of his campaign would inevitably focus on scandal management and damage control, her campaign could focus on positive messaging about change and progress that aligned with voter desires for political renewal. Share this complete political transformation with everyone who needs to understand how scandal-free candidates defeat corrupt politicians. Hit that share button and tell your friends they need to see this masterclass in political contrast and why character matters in political campaigns. The fundraising advantages that Crockett brought to the race became increasingly apparent as her viral political brand translated into massive small-dollar donation totals that provided both financial resources and grassroots validation for her candidacy. Unlike Paxton, whose legal expenses and potential federal charges created ongoing financial drains on his resources, she could focus entirely on building a winning campaign operation. Her proven ability to generate national media attention and viral social media content provided additional value for maximizing the impact of her campaign spending while building name recognition and support among voters who might not otherwise pay attention to down-ballot races. This organic media generation capability represented a significant financial advantage that traditional campaign spending couldn't replicate. The volunteer recruitment potential that her candidacy represented reflected both her inspirational political message and the enthusiasm that her viral political moments had generated among Democratic activists and progressive organizations. The combination of professional campaign staff and energized grassroots volunteers provided a foundation for field operations that could compete effectively in all regions of the state. Republican donor response to Paxton's likely candidacy revealed significant concerns about investing in a candidate whose ongoing legal troubles could derail his campaign at any moment while potentially damaging other Republican candidates through guilt by association. Uncertainty surrounding his federal investigation made long-term campaign planning nearly impossible, while limiting his ability to attract major contributions from donors concerned about scandal. The contrast in their campaign organizations reflected these fundamental differences in support and resources, while highlighting the professional advantages that Crockett brought to electoral competition. Her campaign attracted experienced Democratic operatives and consultants who were excited about working for an inspiring candidate with real victory potential. While Paxton's operation would likely be constrained by his reputation problems and ongoing legal distractions, what is your opinion on this incredible political matchup? Comment below and let me know which factor do you think gives Jasmine the biggest advantage: her legal background, a viral political brand, or Paxton's corruption scandals. The policy contrast between their candidacies provided additional advantages for Crockett, while highlighting areas where Paxton's record created vulnerabilities with key voter constituencies. Her support for healthcare expansion, reproductive rights, criminal justice reform, and economic equality aligned with majority positions among Texas voters, while his opposition to these priorities reflected the ideological extremism that had been hurting Republican candidates in competitive races. Her background as a civil rights attorney provided credibility for discussing criminal justice reform and police accountability in ways that resonated with communities affected by these issues, while demonstrating her commitment to constitutional principles and equal justice. Paxton's record of defending police misconduct and opposing reform efforts created a stark contrast that would be particularly important among minority voters and suburban progressives. The international implications of having a senator under federal investigation represented another area where Paxton's candidacy created problems for Republican messaging about law and order, while providing Crockett with opportunity to highlight the importance of ethical leadership in representing America globally. Her clean record and commitment to democratic values provided a foundation for discussing America's role in promoting justice and human rights internationally. Environmental policy provided another area where Crockett's positions aligned with growing voter concerns about climate change and clean energy, while Paxton's record of opposing environmental protections and defending fossil fuel interests reflected the kind of outdated thinking that younger voters were rejecting. The economic opportunities associated with renewable energy development gave her additional credibility for discussing the future of Texas energy policy. The healthcare implications of the race became particularly important as voters continued dealing with the aftermath of pandemic-related economic disruption while facing ongoing concerns about access to affordable care. Crockett's support for healthcare expansion and prescription drug reform contrasted sharply with Paxton's record of opposing these popular initiatives while defending insurance company interests. People, this policy contrast analysis is absolutely incredible. Subscribe right now because we bring you the complete breakdown that shows exactly how political positions affect electoral success. Share this with everyone who needs to understand why policy matters in political campaigns. The timeline for the 2026 election cycle provided additional advantages for Crockett's candidacy while creating pressure points for Paxton's campaign that could become insurmountable if his legal troubles continued escalating. The possibility that federal charges could be filed during the campaign season created uncertainty that would make his candidacy increasingly untenable as the election approached. Her ability to focus entirely on campaigning while building a positive message about change and progress contrasted with his need to balance campaign activities with legal defense strategies and potential court appearances that could dominate news coverage and campaign resources. The distraction factor alone represented a significant competitive disadvantage that could prove decisive in a close race. The primary election dynamics that would precede the general election provided additional opportunities for Crockett to highlight her advantages, while forcing Paxton to defend his record against Republican challengers who might be willing to criticize his fitness for higher office. Even if he survived a primary challenge, the process of defending his scandal would provide opposition research material for the general election campaign. The endorsement patterns that were already emerging reflected the fundamental differences in their political coalition, while highlighting the challenge Paxton faced in building support beyond his core conservative base. While Crockett attracted endorsements from respected political leaders, civil rights organizations, and professional associations, his support remained limited to Trump loyalists and conservative advocacy groups. The media narrative that developed around their likely matchup consistently favored Crockett's campaign themes of change and ethical leadership, while highlighting the defensive posture that Paxton's scandals forced him to maintain throughout the campaign cycle. The contrast between positive and negative messaging provided additional advantages for her campaign's ability to attract undecided voters and build momentum. All right, everyone. That is the complete breakdown of why political experts are already calling this Senate race for Jasmine Crockett before the campaign has even officially begun. From FBI investigations to Republican defections to viral political star power, we've seen how systematic corruption creates its own political destruction while authentic leadership builds unstoppable momentum. What is your take on this incredible political development? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, and let me know which aspect of this analysis shocked you the most. Paxton's corruption scandals, Crockett's political advantages, or the way this race could change the entire balance of power in American politics. Smash that like button if you think this was the most comprehensive political analysis you've ever seen of why scandal-plagued politicians lose to authentic leaders. Subscribe to this channel because we bring you the political insights that show exactly how character and competence defeat corruption and extremism every single time. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand why the 2026 Texas Senate race is already over before it is officially begun, and how one announcement can completely transform the political landscape of America's second largest state. This is exactly how political earthquakes work when justice finally catches up to corruption. The historical context that makes Crockett's candidacy so significant extends far beyond immediate electoral politics to represent a fundamental shift in how Texas voters evaluate character and competence in their political leadership. For decades, the state's Republican establishment had been able to rely on partisan loyalty and cultural appeal to maintain power, even when individual candidates carried significant personal or professional baggage. Paxton's survival through multiple scandals had been viewed by many observers as evidence that Texas voters were willing to overlook corruption as long as politicians maintained conservative positions on cultural issues. But Crockett's entrance into the race provided the first serious test of whether that calculation would hold when faced with a charismatic alternative who could speak authentically to conservative values of law and order while exposing the hypocrisy of corrupt officials. The legal profession's response to this matchup represented a particularly interesting dynamic that highlighted how professional expertise and ethical standards could become decisive factors in political campaigns. Bar associations and legal ethics experts who rarely engaged in partisan politics began commenting on the stark contrast between a respected civil rights attorney and an attorney general under federal investigation. This professional validation provided additional credibility for Crockett's campaign messaging about competence and integrity while creating problems for Paxton's ability to claim law enforcement credentials when the legal community itself was questioning his fitness for his current office. Arguments for promoting him to higher office became increasingly difficult to sustain. Hit that like button if you think professional expertise should matter more in political campaigns. Subscribe because we analyze exactly how career accomplishments translate into political credibility and why voters are starting to demand competence alongside ideology. The regional political dynamics within Texas provided additional insights into why Crockett's candidacy represented such a strategic threat to Republican dominance, while highlighting opportunities for building a winning statewide coalition. Her appeal in major metropolitan areas like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin provided a foundation of urban support that could be supplemented by gains in rapidly growing suburban communities. The demographic transformation of these suburban areas had been creating opportunities for Democratic candidates who could appeal to college-educated professionals and younger families seeking quality governance and ethical leadership. Crockett's background and communication style aligned perfectly with these voter priorities, while Paxton's scandals represented exactly the kind of political dysfunction they wanted to change. Rural communities that had traditionally formed the backbone of Republican electoral success provided additional complexity for Paxton's candidacy due to his specific vulnerabilities around agricultural and law enforcement issues. The FBI investigation and prosecutor resignations create questions about his competence that extended beyond partisan politics to basic governance concerns. For voters in small towns and rural counties who depended on effective law enforcement and ethical public administration, the prospect of supporting someone whose own office had been in chaos due to scandal and investigation represent a fundamental contradiction with their stated values and practical needs. The economic implications of the Senate race extended beyond traditional partisan divisions to encompass broader questions about Texas's future development and competitiveness in attracting businesses and investment. Corporate leaders and economic development professionals increasingly viewed political stability and ethical governance as crucial factors for long-term prosperity. Crockett's clean background and professional competence provided advantages for attracting business support, while Paxton's ongoing legal troubles created uncertainty that could affect economic development efforts. The contrast between stability and chaos became particularly important for voters concerned about Texas maintaining its competitive advantages in a rapidly changing national economy. Comment right now and tell me what you think about how political scandals affect economic development. Hit that like button if you believe voters are starting to prioritize competence alongside ideology. The contrast with Paxton's volunteer recruitment challenges reflected the fundamental difference between inspiring political leadership and defensive damage control campaigns. While her supporters were excited about positive change, his campaign would be forced to focus on explaining scandals. The media strategy implications of their different political positions provided additional advantages for Crockett's campaign while highlighting the defensive posture that Paxton's legal troubles would force throughout the election cycle. Her ability to focus on positive messaging about change and progress contrasted sharply with his need to constantly address corruption allegations. The congressional dynamics that would affect the Senate race provided additional context for understanding why Crockett's candidacy represented such a strategic opportunity for Democrats, while creating complications for Republican campaign coordination. Her proven ability to work effectively in Congress and build bipartisan relationships demonstrated the kind of practical political skills that voters expected from their senators. The debate and public appearance dynamics that would define much of the campaign provided additional advantages for Crockett's superior communication skills, while highlighting areas where Paxton's defensive posture would create ongoing political problems. Her courtroom experience and viral political moments had demonstrated exceptional ability to think quickly and respond effectively under pressure. The investigative reporting opportunities that this race would generate provided additional challenges for Paxton's campaign. While creating platforms for highlighting Crockett's advantages, national media outlets were already expressing interest in covering the contrast between a rising Democratic star and a scandal-plagued Republican Attorney General. The polling implications that were already becoming apparent showed fundamental challenges for Paxton's candidacy that went beyond traditional partisan metrics to encompass basic questions about fitness for office and voter confidence. Early surveys showed significant concerns, even among Republican voters, about supporting someone under federal investigation. Crockett's polling advantages reflected both her growing name recognition and the positive voter response to her background and political communication style. The combination of professional accomplishments and viral political presence created approval ratings that provided a strong foundation for building a winning statewide coalition. The campaign timeline and key milestone analysis showed how Paxton's legal trouble would create ongoing vulnerabilities throughout the 2026 election cycle, while providing Crockett with consistent opportunities to highlight ethical contrast and demonstrate superior qualifications for representing Texas in the Senate. All right, everyone. That is the complete breakdown of why political experts are already calling this Texas Senate race for Jasmine Crockett before the campaign has even officially begun. From FBI investigations to Republican defections to viral political star power, we've seen how systematic corruption creates its own political destruction, while authentic leadership builds unstoppable momentum. What is your take on this incredible political development? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, and let me know which aspect shocked you most. Paxton's corruption scandals, Crockett's advantages, or how this race could change American politics. Smash that like button if you think this was the most comprehensive analysis of why scandal-plagued politicians lose to authentic leaders. Subscribe because we bring you insights that show exactly how character and competence defeat corruption every single time. Share this with anyone who needs to understand why the 2026 Texas Senate race is already decided and how one announcement can completely transform the political landscape. This is exactly how political earthquakes work. When justice finally catches up to corruption,